Tonight on Bridge City News, an ammonia leak in the town of Claresholm forced some evacuations. We spoke to the town's fire chief to find out where the leak originated. Many in the Alberta energy industry are celebrating today as the Keystone XL pipeline received a court decision in its favor. And Whoop Up Days continues at Exhibition Park. BCN's Loris Alexander headed down to the grounds to see what was up today.
Your nation, your province, your southern Alberta. From the heart of Lethbridge, it's Bridge City News with Hal Robbins.
Good evening. Thanks so much for joining us. The town of Claresholm was under a state of emergency for a short time yesterday afternoon following an ammonia leak at El Molino Foods on Alberta Road. Town officials say employees were evacuated as soon as the leak was discovered at 2 p.m. Around 3:30 p.m., 7 Lethbridge firefighters in hazmat suits were called in to help the Claresholm Fire Department cap the leak. The situation was brought under control by 7 p.m. Claresholm Fire Chief Sean Kelly explains where the leak originated.
One of their tanks in the compressor room in the building, and they were working on a valve that was leaking, and at that point it got to too high a level, so they had to retreat out of the building, and then we didn't make entry again until the hazmat team was on scene.
Premier Jason Kenney is calling it encouraging news for Albertans and our nation as a whole. Nebraska's highest court lifted one of the last major hurdles for the Keystone XL pipeline today. It rejected another attempt to derail the project by those who wanted to force the developer, TC Energy out of Calgary, to reapply for state approval. The court upheld the decision of regulators who voted in November of 2017 to greenlight a route through the state. The decision is a big win for the $8 billion project, which has been mired in lawsuits and regulatory hearings since it was first proposed in 2008. Business groups and some unions support the project as a way to create jobs and reduce the risk of shipping oil by trains that can derail. The 1,900-kilometer pipeline would carry an additional 830,000 barrels of oil per day from the oil sands to the Gulf Coast. The fun continued at Exhibition Park today for Whoop Up Days. BCN headed down to the grounds once again to take in some of the excitement during Day 3.
So we're here with Little Ray's Nature Center. We have our Venom exhibit at Whoop It Up Days, and we're here to talk about venomous animals and poisonous animals, and those are the animals that we have here, and what to look out for, which ones are actually dangerous, and possibly get over some fears that people might have.
Here we have our Venom exhibit for people to come and look at. They're able to learn all different types of things about different types of venomous animals, and maybe learn about some myths and misconceptions that they thought they had about these animals, and realize that they're really not all that scary as people make them out to be. We have various types of venomous little critters and even some poisonous. Some are more venomous than others. So we have our rattlesnake, our green mamba, and our cottonmouth. Those ones are pretty impressive to be having on display and talk about. And then we have some that are not so venomous. Garter snakes. People don't know that those are venomous. And our false water cobra. She's beautiful. She's venomous as well, but not usually considered to be dangerous.
Nothing says community like inviting your neighbors over for hot pancake breakfast, especially when it's for a great cause. Proactive Real Estate served up flapjacks and other hot eats in support of the Lethbridge Pregnancy Care Centre today.
Last year, Edwin Quinteros from Proactive came into the center, asked some questions, and said, you know what, we really want to support the Pregnancy Care Center. We want to host a fundraiser for you. So this is the second annual Toonie Breakfast that they have very generously sponsored and hosted, with the proceeds going to the Pregnancy Care Center.
At Proactive Real Estate, we've decided that we want to support organizations that are family-oriented. And this one here, the Pregnancy Care Center, they do such a great job of helping women, who are pregnant and who are not sure what they want to do or where to go, and there's a support system there. So we are family-oriented. My family is actually composed of 6 children and my wife, of course, so it's fairly large. And we just want to give back to the community. And this year we have 13 other businesses that have come on board and support this great cause.
Lowen says they can always use volunteer help, financial support, and donated baby items. If you can help out, contact the Lethbridge Pregnancy Care Centre. At BCN, we've covered many stories about people riding their bikes across Canada for various causes. We recently met a 6-year-old girl who spent her summer vacation riding her mountain bike across British Columbia.
Abigail Higgins points to the sleeping bag that she has attached to her mountain bike. It's the bag that she slept in for over a month this summer. And this is the bike that carried the 6-year-old from Victoria to Lethbridge in just over 40 days.
We were biking across BC, 44 days on the trail.
Abby's riding partner, her dad, Bob Higgins.
She was in her element the whole time, and she sang and danced and talked my ear off for all day, most days on the bike, eh? And
Yeah.
we've always been pretty close, her and I. We've adventured and traveled and done lots of sports and travel and backcountry life and camping together. Abigail's been a backcountry girl for a few years now, so she can pitch a tent and catch and clean a fish.
And now add riding a mountain bike over 1,800 kilometers and 15,000 meters of elevation.
Our trip went from, we rode down East Hastings in Vancouver as part of our trip, and then out into remote wilderness and over 7 mountain ranges, and everything from water slides to wildlife to lakes and rivers.
Along the way, the father-daughter duo did it all and saw it all, including a close encounter with a bear.
4 of them, and the 4th bear we almost hit by inches. From like me to my bike. My dad could have reached and touched it off of his handlebars.
The two have become practically inseparable following a tragic year.
We've had some tough life experience, Abigail in particular, the last year, and Abby lost her mom back before Christmas last year, and so we wanted to kind of push the reset button.
And through this adventure, Higgins learned some powerful lessons he'd like to pass on to other parents.
I think we just want to encourage people that, this isn't crazy or outrageous. We can do this, and so can our kids. If we set aside our mental blocks or reorganize some of our priorities for what's really important and get ourselves and our kids out there in nature.
For Bridge City News, I'm Jeanette Rocher.
The City of Lethbridge has announced that 4 new Level 2 electric vehicle charging stations are now online. You'll find these ones outside of the front entrance of the Cor Van Ray YMCA at the ATB Centre. The chargers are accessible using the Flow mobile app, which allows users to find stations, pay for sessions, and view their usage data. The stations take 4 to 6 hours to fully charge a vehicle at a cost of $2 per hour. This is the first public charger for West Lethbridge. There was a landslide on Highway 40 near Sheep Creek Provincial Park in Kananaskis Country. Traffic was reduced to a single lane. Due to the road damage, the lane closure is expected to remain in place for several months. Officials say a new retaining wall has to be built along with landslide excavation and repaving. Motorists should allow extra time for travel. The Canadian military is facing calls to train its recruiters to identify and screen out members of various hate groups. The military is also being accused of failing to take the issue seriously by adopting what several experts say is a wait-and-see approach. The criticism follows an internal military report and various incidents linking some service members to hate groups. That includes an investigation this week into a reservist in Manitoba who's suspected of being a recruiter for a neo-Nazi group. The Defense Department says the military already uses interviews and background checks to screen recruits for hateful beliefs. U.S. Secretary of State Mike Pompeo took direct aim at how China has tied the detention of 2 Canadians to the arrest of a Chinese tech executive. Canadians Michael Skovrig and Michael Spavor have been held in China shortly after the arrest of Huawei executive Meng Wanzhou at the request of the United States. Pompeo says China's arbitrary detention of the 2 Canadians was different than Canada's decision to use its due process in Meng's extradition case.
We started with immediately being very clear about the inappropriate nature of this unlawful detention of these 2 Canadian citizens. We spoke about it early, and we speak about it a great deal. President Trump mentioned it directly in his meeting with President Xi Jinping. I was there when he did it. He made unambiguous America's concern about this inappropriate behavior. And then we've engaged in other diplomatic activity, trying to help make the case for the release of these 2, and we'll continue to do that until such time as they're home and return to their families.
Prime Minister Justin Trudeau will spend this weekend in France attending the G7 summit. The leaders are expected to talk about the global economy, trade, and Brexit. French President Emmanuel Macron, however, is urging his counterparts to put the fires in the Amazon rainforest on the summit agenda. European officials say a sense of urgency is warranted, given that the Amazon provides 20% of the world's oxygen. Brazil's official monitoring agency is reporting a large increase in wildfires this year. Brazil's President Bolsonaro said, however, without citing evidence, non-governmental agencies could be setting them up to look bad. We have more now in this report.
Brazil contains more than half of South America's Amazon rainforest, and government officials there are reporting a huge jump in wildfires, up 84% compared to a year ago. That's put deforestation into the international spotlight, along with Brazil's populist president, Jair Bolsonaro. Thursday, without providing evidence, he accused some non-governmental groups of setting fires in the rainforest in retaliation for losing state funds under his administration. He also lashed out at journalists. Bolsonaro has described Brazil's rainforest protections as an obstacle to economic development. He says he wants to convert land for cattle pastures and soybean farms. Thursday, the spokesman for the UN's Secretary General weighed in.
We're very concerned about these fires, both, I think, for the immediate damage that they're causing, and also because sustaining forests is crucial in our fight against climate change.
NASA gauges the scope of the problem through its satellite imagery.
And the fires we're seeing today have all of the hallmark characteristics of deforestation fires. They're being set at the interface between standing Amazon forests and the edge of existing agricultural areas. They're being set at a time of year when the rest of the landscape isn't particularly vulnerable to wildfires. So the human actions that are going into setting these fires are very intentional.
Amnesty International is pinning blame for the wildfires on Bolsonaro, while Germany and Norway have decided to withhold millions in funding for sustainability projects in Brazil's forests. Experts say Brazilians, especially farmers, could be the first victims of excessive deforestation, with higher temperatures leading to less rain and changes in the climate. Ned Barker, Associated Press.
Fair trade. You have most likely heard of it. It is labeled on foods where you know the workers in countries where their product originated are being paid and treated fairly. Erin Bird is with the Canadian Fair Trade Network, and she says we should be concerned if we purchase foods that are a lot cheaper than what we can buy from local producers.
When you take a look at the price of, say, a banana, and you compare it to even the price of a local product, such as an apple, and you can see the disparity there with all of the amount of cost and even just shipping that type of a fruit, a banana, from another country all the way to Canada. It's really very disparaging to see that the cost is almost cheaper than buying local produce. And so you have to wonder, where in the supply chain are people not being paid? And that's really the crux of what fair trade is trying to address.
Watch the full interview with Ms. Bird discussing fair trade coming up in the second half of our show. There's some great family movies playing at the Mill this weekend, including The Secret Life of Pets and Paw Patrol. With more, here's another Movie Mill Minute.
Paw Patrol Ready Race Rescue. It's the Adventure Bay 500. The pups have built an awesome racetrack and are ready to be the pit crew for their race hero, the Whoosh. But when the legendary racer is unable to drive in the championship race, he calls on his biggest fan pup, Marshall, to take the wheel and race in his place. Marshall has to overcome his lack of confidence and his dastardly competition, the Cheetah, to fulfill his dream of becoming the fastest race pup ever.
The official Adventure Bay 500 Pit Crew!
Pit Crew pups, get ready to ratchet!
The Secret Life of Pets 2. Max the Terrier needs to cope with some major life changes when his owner gets married and has a baby. While the family takes a trip to the countryside, nervous Max has numerous run-ins with hostile creatures. Luckily for Max, he soon catches a break when he meets a gruff farm dog who tries to help the lovable pooch overcome his fears.
This is home base to all units. The package has left the building. Does anyone have eyes on him? I don't see him.
Woo-hoo! Attention! This is Captain Snowball. We need backup. Buckle up, everyone.
Looks like more great family movies at the Mill once again. Another beautiful day for Whoop Up Days today, but there's a slight chance of rain developing. All of the weather details are on deck. We had a bit of fog in the Windy City earlier today. This was the scene for some commuters on Bridge Drive on the west side as they headed into work earlier this morning. Fortunately, most of the fog lifted by the early afternoon. The clouds should stick around tonight with a chance of rain developing in a low near 11. Tomorrow, a chance of thunder showers developing for the last day of whoop-up days, and we should see a high near 27. Sunday showers are in the forecast, again with the mercury dropping to 19. A high-pressure system returns on Monday, bringing lots of sunshine and a high near 20. Tuesday, even warmer, up to 24 degrees. Sunny at 21 on Wednesday. Blue sky, sunshine at 23 degrees expected on Thursday. Looking at the almanac, the average high for this time of year is 25 and an average low of 9. The highest temperature on this date was recorded in 1996 at 37 degrees, and the record low was +1 in 1992. Sunrise was at 6:33, sunset at 8:35. Looking at tomorrow's national temperatures now, Victoria will have a mixture of sun and cloud and should see a high near 21. Clearing at 22 for Vancouver. A good chance of a thunder shower and 21 is on tap for Calgary on Saturday. A slight chance of rain at 22 for Edmonton. Thunder showers at 25 for both Regina and Saskatoon. A good chance of rain at 27 for Winnipeg tomorrow. Just a few clouds at 25 for Toronto. Sunshine at 25 as well for Ottawa. Partly cloudy and 23 degrees for Montreal tomorrow. In the Maritimes, Fredericton, New Brunswick will be mainly cloudy and 23. A chance of showers at 22 for Halifax, Nova Scotia. Expect rain at 17 in Charlottetown, PEI. And in St. John's, Newfoundland, there should be some light showers and a high near 18 degrees tomorrow. TC Energy Corporation's long-delayed Keystone XL pipeline cleared a large legal hurdle today as the Nebraska Supreme Court ruled that approval of the route through the state was valid. The court found that there was enough evidence that an alternate route for the pipeline was in the public's best interest. The ruling removes a key roadblock of construction of the $8 billion pipeline, which has been on the drawing board for more than a decade. The project is still tied up on a legal battle in Montana over some permits. TC Energy has yet to officially declare it will build the pipeline. The 1,900-kilometer pipeline would carry 830,000 more barrels of crude per day from Alberta's oil sands to the Gulf Coast refineries. China has escalated its trade war with the United States. It will boost its import taxes on $75 billion worth of American goods on September 1st and December 15th. Beijing says its actions are in retaliation to U.S. President Donald Trump's September 1st tariffs on Chinese products. Neither country appears interested in downscaling their trade war. As a result of the war between the two countries, the markets took another beating today. The Dow was down more than 500 points at one point, and oil was down more than $1. All of the market and commodity numbers are coming up. There are a lot of scams out there right now. Fraudsters are reaching out via text messages, phone calls, and emails. There are CRA scams, home improvement scams, even romance scams. Ron Riemann is with the Better Business Bureau here in Southern Alberta and explains the best way to protect yourself from a scammer.
It sounds so cliche, but follow your gut. Your gut will always tell you if this is too good to be true, and that's the old adage. And we always have to remember that we always have the power to either hang up the phone, slam the door, or put that email link in the recycle bin.
Catch the full interview with Mr. Riemann discussing in detail some of the biggest scams you have to watch out for, coming up after business news. Toy giant Hasbro is going whole hog on Peppa Pig. The maker of G.I. Joe and Monopoly will pay about $4 billion to buy Entertainment One, which is located in Toronto. The British entertainment company produces Peppa Pig and other animated shows for preschoolers. Peppa Pig, which stars a pink cartoon pig with a British accent, is seen around the world and is translated into 40 different languages. Now, here's a look at today's markets. Recapping one of our top stories this hour, the town of Claresholm was under a state of emergency for a short time yesterday afternoon following an ammonia leak in El Molino Foods on Alberta Road. Town officials say employees were evacuated as soon as the leak was discovered at 2 p.m. Around 3:30 p.m., 7 Lethbridge firefighters in hazmat suits were called in to help the Claresholm Fire Department cap the leak. The situation was brought under control by 7 o'clock. Have you seen those labels on produce at grocery stores called Fair Trade? It has to do with workers in countries being paid and treated fairly. Aaron Bird with Fair Trade Canada will have more details next. But first, here's a look what's happening in and around your community.
Here's your Bridge City News community calendar. The 2019 Prairie Chapter Tree Climbing Championship is taking place August 24th and 25th at Kinsman Park in Lethbridge. This event will feature the best male and female professional tree climbing arborists from across the prairies. The top 2 climbers will advance to the International Tree Climbing Championships next year in Albuquerque, New Mexico. Come out and cheer them on from 9 a.m. to 7 p.m. on Saturday and from 10 a.m. to 3 p.m. on Sunday. The 11th annual Care for Kids Golf Tournament is taking place Thursday, August 29th at Paradise Canyon Golf Resort, benefiting the Lethbridge Food Bank and the Canadian Tire Jumpstart Program. $20,000 of the proceeds will go directly to children in our community to help them participate in sports and activities. For details on how to take part as a player or sponsor, visit lethbridgefoodbank.ca. Lethbridge Legal Guidance is a nonprofit society offering free legal advice to low-income Southern Albertans. It holds clinics on Tuesdays from 5 to 7 p.m. by appointment only. Some of the areas the society assists in include family, criminal, traffic, immigration, EI, and other issues. For more information, call 403-380-6338 or email Lethbridge Legal Guidance at telus.net. And that's your Bridge City News community calendar.
Fair Trade. You've likely heard of it and perhaps purchased Fair Trade products, but how does the system actually work? To explain the process in more detail is Aaron Bird, who is with the Canadian Fair Trade Network. Aaron, welcome to BCN.
Great, thank you so much. I'm happy to be here.
Now, most people have probably seen a lot of the packaging in stores labeled Fair Trade, but I wonder if many of us really know what that actually means. Aaron, what is Fair Trade?
So Fair Trade is a certification that you will often see on products. There are many different labels, but the Canadian Fair Trade Network endorses a certification that is administered by the Fair Trade International and the Fair Trade Labeling Organization. And it's a very comprehensive label, very robust auditing practices that are taken, and it looks at the actual price that is paid for a product to the producer, as well as the type of working conditions that those producers are employed under, whether there's any child labor in the supply chain, any slavery, modern day slavery. It also looks at environmental standards and makes sure that there are certain minimum standards that are being met to avoid harmful chemicals on the earth. It's also meant to provide benefit to the community. So there's community investment with the international fair trade system. And it's meant to be a long-term relationship with the producer organization so that they can count on that money and and they can actually plan for the future.
So child labor and slave labor, that's very disconcerting. Do we see a lot of that in the 21st century?
You know, you would be surprised. A lot of people don't realize, but there is a lot of modern day slavery even today. A lot of times there are problems with children being put to work, sometimes on behalf of the family who feel very desperate. They need a way to be able to make some money to keep their family going. And oftentimes children get, especially in the chocolate industry, we hear of this often where children get sold into basic slavery conditions in order to try to get some minimum amount of money for the rest of the family. So it is more widespread than people think.
So we have a problem in some countries where workers do not have good working conditions and are not being paid a fair price for their hard work and their products. How common is this right now?
Yeah, unfortunately, it's quite common, and it's really the norm. And you see this when you look at the price of certain items in the store. Like when you take a look at the price of, say, a banana, and you compare it to even the price of a local product, such as an apple, and you can see the disparity there. with all of the amount of cost and even just shipping that type of a fruit, a banana, from another country all the way to Canada, it's really very disparaging to see that the cost is almost cheaper than buying local produce. And so you have to wonder, where in the supply chain are people not being paid? And that's really the crux of what fair trade is trying to address, that there's inequalities in the supply chain, and how can we best address those?
Are there some countries which refuse to work with groups like your own?
Well, being part of the Canadian Fair Trade Network, we are primarily focused with Canadian products that are exported or imported into Canada. The Fair Trade International system, probably there's less reception on some countries to actually get involved in the fair trade system. And so that's why we often don't find maybe products from some of the Middle Eastern countries. A lot of countries that have unrest might be less willing to actually participate in the fair trade system.
So Aaron, how do you go about identifying which workers are not getting paid fairly?
To be honest, it's more Fair Trade International does some advocacy work in various countries. The Canadian Fair Trade Network, per se, does most of our work locally here in Canada. But basically, the Fair Trade International waits for producers to come to them. I don't think there's as much of searching for the inequality, but trying to spread the word that fair trade is a system to try and address the disparities that we're seeing in people not being paid a fair price. But those producer organizations have to come voluntarily into the system. There's no coercion or trying to bring people in or searching for that. It's very hard to go into a country and try to uncover where there might be problems. But I think word of mouth from the network and the producers that are involved with the system is more the encouragement that we try to get with getting new producers on board.
And do workers need to apply to receive fair trade help, or do they have to pay anything to be part of it?
Yes, generally the system is that farmers, individual farmers or producers would be part of a cooperative, and then the cooperative would apply to become a part of the fair trade system, and they would pay into the system, but in doing so they would also get the benefits of having a guaranteed minimum price and the premium that goes into community investment.
Yeah, I was going to ask you specifically, let's talk about this premium and where does the money actually go?
So again, with a cooperative, there are representatives that are elected to the board of the cooperative, and they have the power to democratically vote on what sorts of improvements need to be made. So sometimes the premium is spent on just giving bonuses to the workers, going back directly to their families. Other times the investment is more on the business side, so buying new equipment or looking at implementing new processes for the business to improve the business. And then other times it's really about the community, and maybe daycare is needed for the workers, maybe there is an education system that's needed, maybe even there's just a children's program or a sports program that's needed in the community. So it's really up to the producer cooperatives to decide on how best to spend that money.
Now, there are fair trade standards for the products that's being sold, but is there any way to enforce these standards around the world?
I think that's what Fair Trade International is trying to do, is fill that gap and get enough buy-in that eventually, if this is applied universally worldwide and those minimum standards are always being met, then we wouldn't need the fair trade system at all. However, right now, that buy-in is not there, and a lot of governments don't feel compelled to actually implement those standards in their respective countries. So in trying to just address that, we're trying to say that, Canada at minimum should not be importing products that are not a part of an unjust supply chain.
So Aaron, outside of food, what other categories of products does fair trade really certify?
So there are many different industries. The flowers like roses are another industry. There's also the mining, so anything that goes into electronics. There's a new fair phone that's available in the UK. We're hoping that eventually it will come to Canada, but that's a fair trade phone. There's also cosmetic ingredients, so some composite ingredients such as shea butter or coconut butter. Those can be certified as fair trade as well. And then clothing is another big one. Generally, it's fair trade cotton because fair trade is meant to be a non-GMO product. So right now, cotton is the only fair trade textile that's available.
Does fair trade end up costing the consumer more money?
It depends on the commodity, really. When you look at coffee, which is really one of the first staples that was part of the fair trade system, and it's the most familiar product that people know about as a fair trade product, you won't find a big difference because of economies of scale. Coffee has gotten so popular that the fair trade is, if at all, it might be marginally more expensive, but in general, you can find comparable fair trade coffees to conventional coffees. Same with wines. We find that wine is pretty much the same across the board, whether it's a fair trade wine or a non-fair trade wine. But then there's other products where it might be a slight increase in the price. And really the fair trade system is meant to try and cut out as many middlemen as possible, put the power back into the producer's hands, and make sure that they're at least getting a fair share of the total cost of the supply chain.
But is the potential still there, Erin, for the retailer to add as much profit margin as they can, on top of the cost of fair trade items? Or do you kind of put some sort of a cap on it?
I think that's specific to the country that's importing the product. Like, I believe there's Canadian laws that have a cap on how much a retailer can mark up a product. That's not to say that some stores or brands might decide to try to, raise the price a bit higher. The one thing, though, is that a lot of fair trade products are also organic products. So you generally pay a little bit more for organic products. And because fair trade products are organic products, there may be a perception that that increase is due to the fact that they're fair trade, when it might be because they're organic and fair trade.
Now, there are also some critics of fair trade. Some studies have found that coffee bean farmers receive only marginally more income than uncertified farmers. One of the issues they say is oversupply. So the more fair trade coffee available, the price may drop. Any thoughts on that?
To be honest, when we've talked with the Canadian Fair Trade Network and Fair Trade Canada, we've found that that's not the case, that there's often not enough demand for fair trade products. And so there's actually a need for more supply. Basically, oversupply is not an issue right now with fair trade. We're really just looking to build that consumer demand so that we can sell more fair trade products on fair trade terms. Some cooperatives have trouble and they have to sell fair trade products on conventional terms, so they're really losing the benefit.
So when we go shopping, we probably cannot always buy something that's labeled fair trade. In those cases, is there a way to determine whether or not what we're buying is coming from a source that treats workers fairly?
Unfortunately, it does go back to the consumer and doing your research. So I always encourage people to ask the brands that they shop with regularly to be transparent about how they source their materials and be transparent in how their supply chain works. And generally, if a brand or a product is doing a good job of that, they're not scared to share that they're actually proud to show how transparent they can be and to share stories about how they're paying their workers fairly. I think a lot of times when you get limited information from certain brands, or you're not getting the information that you want as far as that transparency piece, then it points to a bigger issue.
So tell me about government involvement when it comes to fair trade. How does that work?
So there is some legislation that's going on in Canada around trying to protect against child labor being in the supply chain, as well as modern day slavery. There was an act that was put forward. I'm not an economist or a politician, so I don't know a whole lot about it, but I do know that there's still more that can be done by the government to really protect that we don't have issues of slavery or child labor in our supply systems. And another big one is human trafficking, which it's all really related. So I think the government is trying to take some small steps. I think as citizens, we need to push our government to take bigger steps to really make sure we're avoiding those problems in our supply chains and are treating people fairly universally.
So which countries, in your experience, Aaron, have been some of the worst violators when it comes to the human trafficking and child labor or even slavery?
Well, I mean, I was very involved in the latest Fashion Revolution Week back in April, and that's really commemorating the Rana Plaza collapse in Bangladesh. I mean, clothing is a huge problem where we're seeing that a lot of Asian countries are being pushed to produce clothing for us at under poverty rates, and it's not fair, and it's definitely something that governments aren't protecting their people from. And so that's where our government needs to take a stand and say we don't want any of that type of low standards or human rights violations coming. We're not supportive of that in our environment, in our culture.
So has Ottawa actually sided with you, saying we're looking into this and we're going to stand up for you and make sure that most products are fair trade?
I believe there is some general support, but I don't think there was any ratified legislation actually requiring companies to disclose where they might be complicit with human trafficking or child labor or modern day slavery.
Do you have any idea what percentage of consumer products sold in Canada are in fact fair trade? Do you have some numbers?
Unfortunately, I wasn't able to get those statistics. It is quite a low number. We do know, however, that products such as fair trade coffee are growing at an increasing rate compared to conventional coffee. For instance, I think the figure was that sustainable brands and fair trade brands are growing at 5 times the rate of conventional brands. So it's obviously something that people are looking for. They want some assurance that their product is sustainable and ethical and is not putting anybody else in precarious situations.
Aaron Bird is with the Canadian Fair Trade Network. Thanks a lot for joining me today via Skype from Calgary.
Thank you.
The Better Business Bureau of Canada has come out with a list of the top 10 fraudulent scams that are ripping Canadians off on a large scale. Joining me now to talk about it is Ron Riemann, an accredited business coach with the Lethbridge branch of the Better Business Bureau. Welcome back to BCN, Ron.
Good to be here, Hal. Thank you.
Last year, Canadians lost over $121 million to scammers.
Amazing.
That's double the amount from 2015.
Yes.
So why is this happening? What's going on?
I don't know why it's happening. I think more or less the marketers, or rather the fraudsters and the scammers, are more slick. They're more intelligent for the wrong reasons, and we seem to fall for the traps that these marketers seem to ploy against us.
Now, apparently, only 5% of people who've been scammed report the crime. Why is the number so low?
I guess one of the reasons, the biggest reasons why that happens, Hal, is because there's a bit of a shame in what's happening, especially for the elderly people who lose a lot of their life savings. How do you explain that to their sons and daughters and their grandchildren, for that matter? So they try and keep it low key, but of course what happens is that it does finally catch up to the family because money's not there and they have to pay the bill still, and so it's the shame. It's the shame that really kind of makes it very, very low key for them.
So who are the other people who are most vulnerable? Seniors, would maybe students, or maybe even new immigrants to our country?
Immigrants as well as teenagers. Teenagers, of course, when they go out into the work field and they get a new job and they're trying to create a new life for themselves professionally and personally. And they find that they want to, not all of them, but some of them want to get quick, rich scheme, when they want to get money very fast. Mm-hmm. And of course, they'll listen to a pitch if it sounds too good. Even if it's too good to be true, they'll fall for it. And they're an age bracket that's very vulnerable right now, too.
So, Ron, bottom line, what should somebody do if they've been scammed? What's the first step? Maybe take us on a variety of steps.
There are a number of steps that you can possibly do if it does happen to you. If you feel like you've been taken, there are a number of things you should do first. First, if it's a local issue, if it's somebody physically that came to your house or phoned you, if you know that person or that business that possibly came to your door or telephoned you, get the local police involved. They may be able to help. Unfortunately, if it's out of province, out of country, or out of out of North America for that reason, they can help. We can help. The Better Business Bureau, Anti-Fraud Center, of course, can help as well. And also, we encourage them to talk about it, because we need to get this information out to the public. We need to, like you and I talking about this right now, we need to let people know about what's going on. And we put out these press releases once a week if anything is fraudulently going on into our community. So we encourage people, as much as they don't want to do this because they feel shamed, we invite them to talk to us, because it's marketers are so slick, like I said earlier. Another good reason is to make sure that don't feel shame, because they are good at what they do. They know what to say. They have their sheets right in front of them. They know what to say next when they get a response from yourself.
Except when it comes to the CRA scam, they say the cops are going to come arrest you at your door.
That's right.
I've received that call, you've received the call, and but hey, we can make this all go away if you pay with iTunes gift cards. Like, what? Come on.
I know, iTunes gift cards, right? And we can talk a little bit about those iTunes gift cards and why they're so popular now. But before we get to that, the CRA, of course, they are a government agency. So when you get a phone call from somebody apparently from the CRA, you would think they would talk more professional about this. But we talked off camera about sometimes these phone callers from the CRA would talk very laid back or very unprofessional. And that should be a red flag. But unfortunately, some people get caught up on the scare tactics that they throw to the listener, to the point where it's like they're terrified, because most, if not all the time, these listeners, these consumers, have done nothing wrong in terms of breaking the law or cheated on their taxes, for that matter. So they automatically, they pull out their wallet, because, of course, the cops are just around the corner, as they like to call it, cops. And of course, that's not true. And one big tip to always realize with the CRA, they will not phone you unless you specifically ask in your tax returns with your accountant that you want to get a phone call. They will always email you, or they will provide a snail mail response all the time.
One of the top scams involves romance? Why don't you tell me a bit about that?
Romance is one of those trickier things that most of it is done online. The activity, that is. The scammers and the fraudsters will put on a painted picture of not themselves, but a picture of someone who they're not, and of course a name and how old they are and what they actually do. It's all make-believe in terms of trying to put on this best impression for this would-be person that you want to bilk as many thousands of dollars as you possibly can. And what happens is that some people will fall for it, and the scammer is trying to build that trust into that listener, and they do that over a long period of time, perhaps 6 to 8 weeks. And when it gets to the point where they know they can trust that person, then they'll bring in the monetary discussion. And just a few years ago, there was an incident in Alberta, northern Alberta. I believe Camrose or Wetaskiwin, and the poor lady was billed over $80,000. And one piece of advice: if it happens to somebody who wants to meet this person, do it in a public place. If they are who they think they are and they're the real deal, have them meet at a coffee shop or meet at a restaurant. So just to make sure that they
take the necessary precautions.
Exactly.
Right? Ron, it sounds like with some of these scams, we really have to check our emotions at the door, don't we?
We sure do. A lot of times we have to kind of look at the big picture and say, is this, I tell consumers who phone me over the phone and say, it sounds so cliche, but follow your gut. Mm-hmm. Your gut will always tell you if this is too good to be true, and that's the old adage. And we always have to remember that we always have the power to either hang up the phone, slam the door, or put that email link in the recycle bin. And just always remember that reputable companies, especially if they come to your door, they'll give you time to think about a purchase if you are interested, instead of the very heavy sales tactic part of it. Reputable companies will phone you the next day and say, hey, listen, can I call you and say, maybe get your answer, let you sleep on it, and that sort of thing. So to summarize again, you've got the power. Hang up the phone if you have to.
How about some of the online purchasing scams that are out there right now? Let's talk a bit about those.
The biggest one right now is skin creams. We get a ton of ladies, at least I have, my office has been phoning my office in terms of skin cream products. And they get it through magazines or television infomercials, and whereas you get this free product, or you get a product that practically it's next to nothing, and it comes to your door, and you think that, well, I've just got this free product, so I'm done with it, and man, it's not too bad, but I don't want to buy it anymore. But what happens is that you don't read the fine print, and they'll start shipping out some more of that skin cream, unaware that they're also dinging your credit card at the same time. And the fine print, the terms and conditions are never mentioned, although, you know, when you look at those small wordings on the bottom of the screen, it just says right there, of course, who can read it? But a lot of people just are unaware that, oh, well, I guess I got more free cream. This is just wonderful until they get their bank statement.
Yeah,
and
that's right.
So what happens is they phone the credit card company, and of course they're going to say, well, maybe not. You may have to phone the company. You phone the company. Of course, they're not from Canada. They're from the United States. And if you're lucky enough to get them on the phone, and if you're lucky enough to have them cancel your subscription, which is a great thing, but sometimes it doesn't happen that way.
How about just cancel the credit card?
Cancel the credit card is probably the fastest thing to do right now.
How about employment scams? Some of those are floating out there too, right?
Yeah, and what happens is that they're through a magazine or an internet page. On the side of the page, it'll say, for $100,000 we can make you manager, and like this apply now. You can become a manager of so and so. You can make this much working with us. And what happens is that these companies here, they won't do any sort of check on you. They won't do any sort of background check. They'll just offer you the job, but they also want a processing fee before they hire you. And of course, that's a red flag right in itself, right there.
Isn't there also the fear of identity theft too? You give them all your personal information.
Another big thing right there too.
Right?
Yeah, you pass on a lot of the personal information, and of course, the bottom line is that if they're not going to get money from you, at least they want to get your personal information from you.
And we've all heard the term phishing scams.
Yes.
And we're not talking about going for trout or salmon.
No.
So what exactly is a phishing scam?
A phishing scam is a phishing scam basically is using a very popular logo of perhaps any company in North America, plastering it on an email, plastering on a snail mail, any sort of correspondence. And basically what they want is information from you, because let's say, for example, it's a bank, one of the national banks. The national bank could probably say that we've noticed there's unscrupulous behavior going on right now. We'd like to make sure that it's coming from your account number. We want to verify it's true or not. Can we make sure that it is true by giving us a call or hit the link, and we'll be able to verify that it's yourself. And of course, that's just one step closer of getting into your personal information. That's all it is.
Now, advance fee loans came in at number 7 on your top 10 list. What are they all about?
Well, you know that most advance fee lenders are licensed here in the province of Alberta, but sometimes you'll get those phone calls, or sometimes you'll get those emails where they can perhaps offer you $15,000, $20,000, $30,000, whatever amount of money, and on top, they'll say, give us the $500 for a processing fee, and we'll give you $15,000, $20,000 as money for whatever you want to do with. And of course, that's another example of getting more of your personal information. We know that it's illegal for anybody to ask for money up front before you get your money yourself from a loan company. So be aware of that, and always go to the reputable lenders here in this province here, because they do a good job of what they're doing, and they're licensed. The ones that are very aggressive over the telephone, they're only in it for one reason, and we know that it's just for your money.
Absolutely. How about tech support scam? I hear that's making the rounds as well. People are intimidated by computers sometimes. They're having issues. They call up. It's like, if you're having problems with your computer, call this number. Let's talk a bit about that.
It's funny because Microsoft, because being the biggest company in the world, one of the biggest companies in the world, you think they have time to phone me or you any time of the day to say that you've got problems with your computer? Of course not. They don't. They don't have time at all. And the one question you have to ask yourself is when someone does phone you and say, well, how do you know my computer is even broken for that matter? And what happens is it's a little bit of a scare tactic too, is because they'll throw in, if your computer doesn't have the proper virus software, then hackers will get in, not knowing, be announced to them, that they're actually talking to a hacker themselves here. So what happens is they try and get the computer person to type in some configuration on the computer, and basically what happens is they want to get your IP address. And what they want to do is either they want to put malware, which is software and to kind of hijack your computer, and they want to obtain as much information as they can. Basically, they want to take control of your computer. And we always say, you know what? Again, if you do have computer problems, and there are companies out there that call themselves Microsoft approved, but they're not. I always say to the consumers that phone my office, it says, take it to a local guy in town here, and he'll be able to fix it for you. It's going to cost you a little bit more, but you know you're going to have it done right. It's here local, and of course it's under warranty, and you'll be able to have peace of mind.
How about some of these fly-by-night contractors that come knocking on your door and they offer up a little bit of home improvement? But a lot of that can be a scam as well.
Lots of times, and using the pavement is a good example of that right now. As we approach warmer weather right now, and more spring renovations are being tackled. Driveways are a big example of that right now. You get an example of somebody with an unmarked van who's down the street putting asphalt down on a driveway, and they'll come to your door and say, hey, listen, we've just finished a job down the street, and we wanted to know whether you want to have your driveway done. And be careful of that sort of thing, you know, because of the fact that you don't know who these people are, you don't know what grade of asphalt it is, for that matter, you don't know how much they're going to charge. So stay away from that as much as you possibly can. And with home contractors, again, they use unmarked vans and they don't have an office. They use a laptop as their office. And a lot of times, too, is they're fly-by-nights, as you said, because they're in so quickly and out so quickly, and they want to get as much money as they possibly can. And please don't give them any deposit until you sign something on paper.
Yeah, I was going to ask, let's say, at the average concrete driveway where the rebar is around $10,000, they say, I want $7,000 right up front before we even start.
I always tell the consumers the 3-3-3 rule, 3 before, 3 during, and 3 after. It provides that incentive for that contractor to make sure that they get the job done.
Now, what about the bank investigator scam? That's interesting.
That's very slick. That's a very slick one. It involves more than one person.
Okay.
And again, it goes back to the banking thing where somebody from the bank supposedly phones you up and says, well, we have some illegal activity going on with your account, and we want to direct you to a bank investigator. And what happens is that they're going to give you the legitimate number of the bank investigator, the legitimate number, but it gets rerouted because what happens is that they buy that number, and the next thing you know, before they hang up, the other person comes onto the line and says, hi, I'm the bank investigator. I'm here to take care of the situation that you've spoken with that person earlier. And it's a two-person job, basically. An employee from the bank, and then somebody who represents themselves as a bank investigator. It's very slick. And the scammers do a lot of practicing to get this done, and they make it look really legit. They do it in the early morning hours before the banks are even open. That's how they do it.
And when we're just waking up sometimes early in the
morning,
I know,
too. And a lot of times we don't have our ball bearings straight,
yeah.
you know, and all of a sudden you just say yes to everything.
Ron, how often should we change our online passwords, and what kind of passwords should we avoid? Like maybe using our birthdays, perhaps?
That's a good thing too, but make sure you add an asterisk or a comma or a punctuation mark, or to kind of mix it up with the uppercase or lowercase a letter. Please do it every 90 days. We notice that some people who buy a laptop, say an iPad or a desktop, they'll just kind of like overshadow the password, and they'll just leave it open. And some people will actually use the password as 12345 or admin or even the word password, and some of these scammers are pretty good at figuring out, trying to go into the minds of people of passwords. So to summarize your question, every 90 days is a good time to change your password.
You also have a scam tracker on the Better Business Bureau website.
Yes.
Tell me more about that.
On our website, www.bbb.org/Calgary, we have information for people who feel that they've been scammed or frauded or have suspicious activity happening with them. We encourage them to leave information about that, so people like you and I can look at that information for our own purposes.
Ron Riemann, accredited business coach with the Lethbridge branch of the Better Business Bureau. Thanks a lot for joining me in studio
Hal, it's
today.
a pleasure. Thank you for having me.
You bet. On behalf of all of us here at BCN, I'm Hal Roberts. God bless and have a great night.